Hello, hello, and welcome. I am Carice. In case you are new here, I never introduced myself, so now I'm going to introduce myself. In case you are new here, I'm Carice. I am live every single week with wonderful content for you guys. This is actually a very special lecture because we're talking about cranial nerves, and I've only had this behind some sort of paywall before. So whether it was the myomodalities class, whether it is myopathway, because you can learn about cranial nerves in both of those avenues, it was something that, I would only do at specific conferences or if I'm lecturing or whatever. So this is awesome because you're getting it at zero cost and available for you to rewatch whenever you need to on YouTube. Okay. So we're going to have a lot of fun today. We're going to talk about some stuff that, I think everybody's always been asking when it comes to cranial nerves, like what's the big deal? Why do I care? Why should I care? And how is this really going to leverage or really up any of the services that I have? I'll tell you that you probably won't make any more money because you work with cranial nerves, but you will be more effective. And so being more effective, I have found for me personally, I really am more of like a control person, and I don't like to have to deal with people in that sense, to like have people working under me. I keep threatening myself to do it, but then I don't do it. Um, just being able to be more effective and more efficient with who I work with currently actually enables me to get through my cases a little easier and, kind of build down on that waiting list. So I'm able to be more efficient. And so that's why it matters really more so than anything else. You want to be as effective as possible. I really don't believe in doing anything under excellence. Okay. So, because I always have a slide in here where I am welcoming you, welcome, welcome, welcome. It's so great to have you here. Keep this alive. I want to keep coming live every week. I want to keep bringing you value, but you got to help me out here a little bit. So, comment, like, share, subscribe wherever you're watching. If you're watching on LinkedIn, hey, hello, leave something in the comments. If you're watching on YouTube, hey, hello, leave something in the comments. If you're watching the replay, again, leave something in the comments. Okay. So, myofunctional therapy, I personally think isn't dynamic enough for all the drama that it brings to your life. Okay. There's been so many conversations that I've had this past week alone about myofunctional therapy, about what it does, about who can do it, about scope of practice, about whether or not we need regulation or don't need regulation. I'll tell you that myofunctional therapy on the scale of people is very basic. It's very, very basic. I don't know how else to really state that. There's so many other things that you really need to work on um, in a way where you're going to be able to impact your patients dynamically beyond just orofacial function. There's so much more you can do for them, whether that be under the scope of you being a coach of some sort. There is more to this game than myo. And I really, really want to push that harder than any other message that you get today about cranial nerves. Okay. In my myomodalities course, I teach this very specifically. This is my like game plan of action. This is how I actually work with people. We have to set a solid foundation, meaning I need to know what's going on with your blood work. What are the levels, the minimums, minerals, the vitamins, deficiencies, what is going on? You've got to manage your diet. Anti-inflammatory diet always is a recommendation. Their energy, what's going on around them. You will notice I never wear an Apple Watch. Very specific about my electromagnetic field and that of which is around me. I have all the different things to kind of help and manage that. And I think it's incredibly important that if you start with that solid foundation, you can build upon it to then work on cranial nerves, primitive reflexes, mapping for trauma, body mapping for trauma. If you've never done body mapping, it is something you absolutely have to get into. And then you can start working on some myo. Then you'll find that people are like flying through a program. People are able to do things that they weren't able to do before because you've worked on their energy, because you dealt with some of their lymphatic drainage, because you dealt with the primitive reflexes that were over retained. So the pillars of progress is the foundation upon which I do all of my work. If you're interested in learning more, that's always Myo Pathway for those of you who are brand new, or Myo Launch, which is this video going to play? I don't know if it's going to play or not. It might not play for me. Oh, there we go. Or my own launch, which is my newer platform that really has everything condensed. Because I used to have courses like kind of all over the place where you had to kind of search, find, or ask me to figure it out. My own modality is on my own launch, in addition to other things. And that's just so you know where you can find more if you're interested in diving deeper, because I really do believe wholeheartedly that everybody should be able to find myofunctional therapy courses that are affordable, accessible, and that dive deeper than like the basicness that is myofunctional therapy and these exercises. Um, that's my wonderful step down now from my soapbox. Okay, cranial nerves. Why do you care? Like, who cares? Who cares about cranial nerves? Why should you care? Why are we even here talking about this? Well, there are 12 cranial nerves, and they are key nerve pairs that connect the brain through electric signaling. So, we all know the body is electric. And if you don't know, now you know. Hopefully, you've had an anatomy and physiology class at some point. And so, you know that all the nerve endings, electricity flows through those. So the body is very electric, and we need these electric signals and stimulation to the face, neck, torso to help us with daily tasks, whether that is some of our motor skills, our sensory perception, or both. It's going to help us whether we're swallowing, we're talking, we're drinking, we're swallowing and drinking is the same thing. We're speaking, we're moving, we're dancing, we're breathing. It's helping with all of our daily function. Cranial nerve 10 being one of the big ones that really do help with all of the organs in the torso, among other things. And so I think it's incredibly important that you understand cranial nerves and how they work and why, because when people have suboptimal functioning or signaling in their cranial nerves, you need to integrate that. If you don't, they have poorer sensory and motor perception. So those people who are really struggling with like simple verbal commands that you're giving them, I want you to get your tongue up to spot. And if you hold your tongue up there on spot and they're like, uh, 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 they can't quite figure it out, or it takes another second. That's not to say that there's not other things going on. There very well could be other things going on, but I rule that out often by working on the cranial nerves first. And then typically I don't have those problems again. If there are learning difficulties, that's a whole different conversation for another time. I'm just saying that their sensory and their motor perception is going to be off if they are not integrated well with those cranial nerves, because they all fire in sequence. So whether it goes from one, and we'll get to all of them today, I promise you will not only understand what they are, what the importance is, but how to stimulate and start to integrate them. And so this is a really good one. If you're short on time, come back later, because you're not going to want to walk away. The cranial nerves fire in sequence. So whether you're going from one and it's just their ability to really capture a sense of smell and really use their nostrils, it's going to impact you all the way back to like 9 and 10 and 12. 12 is a lot of tongue motor function. And so you want to make sure that you are addressing this early on, because if there is something down the line when it fires in sequence, it's going to mess you up in your ability to make more progress. Okay. Many of these cranial nerves are linked to myo. That's super duper obvious once you start seeing like what some of these cranial nerves are. Now, this is going to take sensation and turn it into perception. Okay. So we have our senses. Our senses we're going to stimulate for the cranial nerves, and then that's going to alter the perception. You can think of perception in a way where if the sensation is you twirling around and then you stop and then you feel dizzy, but you are very consciously aware that you have stopped spinning. You are no longer spinning around. And yet you still feel like the room is spinning. That's your delayed perception. That's the brain not signaling right away. We're not moving anymore. We're fine. The brain takes a little second to catch up. So what we're doing is we're taking these sensations, we're stimulating these cranial nerves to help integrate that perception so that we can get it to be what we want it to be. We want that perception to be malleable, for lack of a better term. And so by stimulating and stimulating and stimulating, you're going to find that you'll have a new altered perception, or your clients will have new altered perception. So let's talk about the cranial nerves. We'll go through each one. The olfactory nerve is sensory only. And so this deals a lot with smell. This is your nose. A really great way to test this one is by testing different strong smells. So the smell of citruses, very similar citruses. So you can have lemon. A lot of people use lemon juice and the ability for them to sense that. Clove, some types of spices and so forth, herbs. You can grab different types of scents. You can grab different types of scents and stimulate and see what's going on. Are they able to perceive? I always do this through an active and like really dynamic nasal hygiene routine. So I know a lot of you are using boom boom sticks or neti sticks and whatever, but way back when I learned myofunctional therapy, the weekend right after, I went and I learned Lois Laney's restorative breathing. And in there, I discovered white flower oil. And then from there, I kind of like spread that. So if you see other people doing that, that's me. White flower oil is really, really good. Now, it is like an analgesic balm oil, but it's a combination of a bunch of different essential oils. So it's like camphor, eucalyptus, peppermint, lavender, menthol. I think it's those 5. And then the neti stick is actually just lacking camphor, and it's the same set. So it's very similar, just taking out the camphor oil. But the white flower oil is like an analgesic balm. It's typically like a Thailand. It's produced in Thailand, and it's something that you would have to buy over the internet. You're not going to find it just regularly sitting down in stores. And I don't know how you mix the compounds to the right percentages to say that you can replicate it if you have those essential oils and or menthol at home. So I would just recommend you get the white flower oil just to test this out. But I always stimulate the nostrils first with cotton. What's cotton that you can stimulate in your nostrils? A Q-tip. Okay, a cotton tip applicator as well. You're going to touch all 3 of the areas by the turbinates and then just stimulate them. That cotton, it really gets the nose to be kind of highly sensed. Then once you've opened up your sensory perceptors, it is time now to take one drop of your white flower oil. And I have white flower. It's in the other room. I should have just brought it. That way I can show you. You take one drop of that white flower oil. And that white flower oil, you're going to touch each of those same 3 areas by the turbinates. Again, if you really want to know how to do this in detail, I'm sorry. There's courses I teach where I could go into detail. But for now, I'm just going to kind of browse over it, okay? You're going to touch each of those. That's going to open up. It's like a rush. It gives you like a real big rush the first maybe 2 weeks that you do it, where it's it's open and you have never felt as open and patent in your life. And suddenly now you can smell things that you weren't smelling before. It's a great way to stimulate that cranial nerve 1. Now, what I do as part of my programs is I have them stimulating cranial nerve 1 every single day throughout our myofunctional therapy program. As you're doing myofunctional therapy, okay, I will let you know that 12 is the end, 1 is the beginning. So if they're starting with 1 and they start cycling through because you want to deal with any of the deficits throughout, okay, when they start with 1 and they end with you doing whatever you're doing with the tongue and tongue motor function and so forth, even if you're at the later stages of a myofunctional therapy program and you're working with habituation and you're working with more of the mature functions as activities, more so than isolation exercises, you're going to be continuously stimulating all the cranial nerves. And it becomes something that is very powerful towards the end, where their senses and their perception, it really helps you with that neuromuscular reprogramming, which is your goal. We're trying to make that brain nerve connection. That way it habituates and you don't have relapse, because that's not what we want. Okay. You can use all sorts of things. I would absolutely say there's a myriad of things that you can use and stimulate the nostrils. The boom boom sticks are really great. I think the kids love the boom boom sticks the best. I really avoid the white flower nowadays with the kids because the kids don't like it as much. I have a different blend that I use, and that's something that you can always leave in the comments because comments help with the viewership. So leave that in the comments and I'll be happy to address that for someone. Cranial nerve 2, that's our optic nerve. Now, this, I wonder if anybody has seen more, and you can let me know in the comments if you've seen more of your clients, if you're already seeing myofunctional therapy patients, or if you're working as a dental clinician and you're seeing it in your op, where more people are reporting that they've been doing vision therapy. So, cranial nerve 2 is sensory only, and it's all about vision. Now, I wear glasses, I have corrective lenses, I know lots of people who do. But once the vision is corrected, that doesn't necessarily mean that everything is good. There's a lot of ways that you can really help to stimulate this through a different type of therapy, a different type of modality, vision therapy. So vision therapists, I think, are the very best. I've been like talking with some, and they're actually called orthoptists. They practice or they learn orthoptics. It's really weird to pronounce. I don't like saying it, but vision therapists is what I'm going to call them. It's a certification process. It's really not unlike what we have in Myo, except they're accredited. They have like an accrediting body, and that body is what helps to regulate it. And then from there, you can do any of the programs that are under that accreditation. But it's a certification process. So they're not necessarily licensed. They're just highly educated and regulated upon that. The Academy of, they're regulated by the ophthalmologist, and it's like a whole thing within medicine. Anyway, so they're regulated. And so vision therapy is actually going to take that visual processing and help to change and alter it and to change your perception of things. And so it's really, really interesting because you'll find there are some people whose vision is off, but not by enough that they need to have corrective lenses. It'll be something where it's off and it needs to be stimulated in a different way. They use a lot of great tips and tools and tricks. They have special glasses. They have like special things that help to stimulate the vision and the light. They use colors, red and blue. And it's actually really, really interesting to see a lot of your orthoptics. A lot of your orthoptics are going to happen either in an office, so they'll work with an optician or an ophthalmologist. They'll work with them in their office, doing the exercises and so forth. And then guess what? The clients go home or the patients go home and they do it at home. So they have to do these exercises at home. It's like myofunctional therapy, but like specifically for the eyes. And so it's really, really interesting. And that's a great way if you find that there's a deficiency with cranial nerve 2, and that's really not for you to find, to be totally honest. I would just always ask about their vision history. When's the last time they had their vision checked and so forth. But when they have a deficiency with cranial nerve 2, the best recommendation you can do is suggest that they see an orthoptist. I hate saying that word. Okay. Cranial nerve 2, you can stimulate on your own in your practice by having bright colors. So you notice with me, a lot of things are orange. Like it's orange when I'm doing presentations. I'm not wearing orange today, but typically when I'm lecturing, I like to wear orange. It's a bright color. It really draws your eye to me or to whatever. If it's not orange, then I'll use a yellow. But I really like the bright colors, and I put that around my office. I carry them in my mobile bag. Like I make sure that I have things that are bright and colorful and beautiful because you want to stimulate the visual senses as much as you can. And so having these bright colors that are everywhere, it really does help to stimulate a little bit too. So that's how we stimulate cranial nerve 2. Cranial nerve 3 is a motor. So finally we get to some motor skills. Oh, it's been a while since we've seen anything motor, right? It's the eyelids and the eye movement. So this is your eyes like following a stimulus. So you'll see people who do certain tests where, they're looking to see. And those people typically are optometrists or nurses in schools or whatever. Your physician might actually do these types of tests too. But For you, if you want to make sure that you're getting that eye contact, that they're following you, I test this with cranial nerve 6 because cranial nerve 6 is going to be the movement of the eyes, but you can actually get really into what's going on. Can their eyes move all the way without moving their head? Can their eyes move all the way to one side and follow you to the other and follow you up and follow you down and close eyes and lift brow and relax and open? Is the eyelid going in the same time for the close, or is it like they have to do a 1 and then a 2? Some people do that. Pupil dilation, I really don't like messing with pupil dilation. There's a lot of different reasons why people's pupils can be dilated, so we're not going to go here, there, or anywhere. I like to stimulate cranial nerve 3 in the same way that we're stimulating cranial nerve 2. Lots of visual colors. And I also make sure I get eye contact, and I like to move around. I don't believe myofunctional therapy should be I sit down and we're going to do this and we're just going to sit here in this one chair and we're not going to move. How am I going to get your fine motor function to do anything if I am like crushing your gross motor function by having you sit in a chair to try to stimulate learning? Learning, we already know by a bunch of research, isn't really that great in standards of which we are teaching it, whether it be to children or even adults, by just sitting down. A lot of people learn by doing. We have so much information on the internet. There's so much that people are, getting themselves into and getting their hands on. And a lot more mobility, I think, is really good. So I always make sure that I am moving around so that we can continue to stimulate what's going on with the eyes and keep the attention. And I have them looking away and looking at things and look at their feet and look at their, we're moving all the time. So we're moving the eyes. It's incredibly important. So 2 and 3, lots of stimulation. I'm going to check in a minute and see if I have any questions in the chat. So if you have any questions, just throw them in there. But let's talk about cranial nerve 4. We've got another motor one, our trochlear. Trochlear, eye movement down, okay, and to the center. So can they follow you right to the center? Our eye movement is very similar between the other two, bright and vibrant colors, sensory toys, and so forth. I'm going to pop over to this other window for the chat. What do you use for kids to stimulate cranial nerve 1? Thanks, Amanda, for asking. I'm going to write it in the chat just to make sure that people are actually still paying attention and following along. I will write it in the chat, but I'm glad that you were there and you were listening. I appreciate that. Okay, cranial nerve 5, trigeminal, sensory and motor. Okay, sensory and motor all together. The trigeminal is like the last one that I check for most of my myofunctional therapy intakes and evaluations. Now, I'll tell you, if you're spending 2 hours doing a myofunctional therapy evaluation and you're not looking at primitive reflexes or their cranial nerves and you're just looking at myofunctional therapy stuff, you're wasting too much time. It takes me 45 to 60 minutes tops to do all of that, to do the myo stuff and get the cranial nerves and get some of the other accessory information that I need to get in order to bring them in and to plan a custom treatment plan. So if you're spending that much time, you're spending too much time. Because cranial nerves, a lot of duplication is there. So with the trigeminal, I think we're all very familiar. If you're a dental professional, you're very familiar with trigeminal, right? This is muscles of mastication, our facial sensory perception. And so this is where we're starting to cross over. This is where we're seeing, oh, you're right. This does actually blend. These two do go together well. So this is where you're going to stimulate with a lot of vibration. You would, I always stimulate this. Cranial nerve 5, if you're testing for it, you're looking for deficiencies or asymmetries. So something that's overdeveloped, underdeveloped, or asymmetric in the muscles of mastication. And then from there, you're going to stimulate it through facial sensory perception. I start everybody with some trigeminal stimulation. So before you can actually start a myofunctional therapy program with me, there's like levels to it, right? So before we actually start getting into, we're going to do tongue or whatever stuff, we start doing some of this other stimulation things. And when we're stimulating, we're activating all of our cranial nerves and they're really gaining these skills. So what this picture is really showing is a woman doing what I think most people call a zerbert, but it's essentially a motorboat. We're going to take a deep inhale through our nose and we're going to exhale through closed lips. That will cause the lips and the cheeks to vibrate. And so you're going to stimulate some of these facial muscles. And so it'll look a little like this. Hopefully I get it right. I was recording for a different course the other day and it was terrible, but let's see if I get it right. I did it. Very excited. That's going to be self-stimulation. There's other ways to stimulate. So before I became very, I'm not going to say what I was going to say. I'm not going to say what I was going to say. There are tools. There are companies that sell tools that you can use for stimulating vibration. You can also self-stimulate vibration. And I think it's really important that you find ways to be creative, especially if you're early on in your myo career. You have to be creative because you don't have all the money to do all the things or to buy all the stuff, right? So one of the things I would do if I was you is take the back of an electric toothbrush and I would probably use the back of the electric toothbrush against the face just a little bit and very lightly, like maybe just one part of it to just kind of stimulate as it is vibrating and stimulate as it's vibrating. I would do a little bit of engagement in some active chewing. So I have chew tubes, which are really aligner trace eaters. So you can also use tubing. A lot of people use that tough tubing, but I like the aligner trace eaters. They're just fiscally responsible. That's how I like to run my life. We're going to take the little chew tube, put it on one side, put it on the other, and then I put them on a vibration plate. And that actually helps really, really well because now they're chewing, their tongue's on spot, they're chewing, their tongue's on spot. If you have a ALF or an ALF or the Crozat, if you have an ALF or a Crozat, this is actually really good if you get them on a vibration plate or a trampoline. Did it get too dark? Oh my gosh, the sun just went away. The trampoline, and you put in a myo munchie or something where they can chew, it's actually going to be an ALF activator, or like that helps with the Crozat too. It's pretty much the same thing, but an ALF activator, that's going to help to stimulate and engage those proprioceptive areas and responses as well. Because with the ALF or the Crozat, it's very biomimetic. The very first versions of the DNA appliance, I don't know that it's the same as it used to be, but very biomimetic. The way that those things were designed, it was designed to move with the body. And so when you get the body in active stimulation and you are getting a lot of the sensory perception to open, it enables you to get change and to start to manipulate that perception into new sensory and how we're going to function things. So that's cranial nerve 5. Cranial nerve 6. This is also, if you were tired of the eyes, it's time to get over that because cranial nerve 6, that's the left, the right, like the lateral movement of the eyes. And so again, we're constantly using bright colors. So anything that is a motor for the eyes, whether it is left, right, or center, down, eyelids, lift, close, like whether it's doing any of that stuff, that's going to be something that you want to make sure that you are actively, one, screening for to see if there's any sort of deficiencies, referring if you need to, but engaging every single time you see them. You want them looking around and to be maneuvering and to see all the different colors, all the different things that are around in the area. So if you like to have a very calm environment, like some people really like lighter shades of blue, calming colors. They want it to feel very zen when you go into their office. That's not going to be very stimulating. It's not going to be an environment upon which you're going to have a lot of the eyes focusing anywhere other than wherever you want them to focus. So I would just encourage you to just give yourself a little pop of color in certain places and make them strategic placements of pops of color, whether it's a little bit of an accessory or it's something that they can tangibly use. So you get the stress balls, get the little toys, the sensory toys that they can actually pick up and move and maneuver. It doesn't have to be just for children. Like adults like sensory toys too. You've ever seen an adult, or you as yourself as an adult, spin a fidget spinner? Like, I've done it before. I'm like, oh, this is interesting. But you get colors, you put colors on the walls, whether it is one little type of accent piece here or a picture there or something on the floor, like a ball on the floor. Make sure you're getting colors and stimulating as much as you can. Okay. Now, I also put in here the basic exercise. If you have not read as of yet, the Accessing the Healing Power of the Vagus Nerve by Stanley Rosenberg, you want to do that. That needs to be like, put it to your cart right now in Amazon or Barnes and Noble and like grab that book. Phenomenal. The basic exercise is going to be a great way that you can leverage stimulation of cranial nerve 6 to help you upregulate cranial nerve 10, the vagus nerve. Okay. We'll get into that in just a second, but cranial nerve 6 can leverage you to cranial nerve 10, and you'll only learn how by Stanley Rosenberg's basic exercise. It is not my exercise. I did not write it and publish it in a book, so I do not feel it is my responsibility to teach people that exercise. I think it would actually probably go against whatever to like give out his work for free. So buy the book. You will not regret it. He explains cranial nerves in a way that is significantly better than how I do. He makes it like a story and kind of illustrates it. And so you'll understand and get the concept significantly better as to why it's so important and how the body is all connected and stimulated through these cranial nerves and why we need to really focus on it as a general population. We don't spend enough time on cranial nerves in any capacity. Cranial nerve 7, that's facial. Hello, myo, sensory and motor. This is all of our muscles of facial expression, a lot of which hopefully many of you are using. If you're not using and you're not leveraging these muscles of facial expression, then bad, very bad. But you guys should definitely be doing that, okay? The facial muscles, we want to stimulate through suction and engagement in lip exercises, engagement in cheek exercises, engagement in any sort of stimulation. By suction, I mean like anything that's going to stimulate our suction and or just your suctioning abilities during random activities that involve saliva or water or liquid of some type and transferring of such and the movement and manipulating of such within the oral cavity. It's really, really great work that prefaces a lot of other things, but hitting this facial before, especially with the suction and engaging in those active types of exercises prior. So I really think it's important to build on a myofunctional therapy program is going to help you hit and integrate things that are important before you get to things like the swallow that comes up in cranial nerve 9 and 10 and so forth. So you want to make sure that you're stimulating when you can, where you can, okay? Vestibulocochlear, this one is a really fun one too. Vestibulocochlear number 8 is one where you're checking the balance. Now, a lot of people seem to think that they have really, really great balance, and here's where I'm going to challenge you and your balance, okay? We are going to stand up straight. If you're able to stand up, take a second, get your senses, get both feet on the ground, and then I want you to stand on one foot. You pick whichever foot you want. Stand on one foot. Hopefully you've got great balance and you're standing on one foot with no problem. I'm standing on one foot right now and there's no wobbling or whatever. Now, I want you to take the other foot, switch feet, and we're going to switch. Still standing? Awesome. Most of you with good balance? Yes, doing great. Here's what I want you to do. Put both feet down on the ground. I'm going to make it harder. I want you to close your eyes. And this is always how you assess it. So do not assess it by having them with their eyes open. You're going to ask them to close their eyes. And now stand on one foot. There is an element of balance where we need our vision in order to facilitate it. Okay. So we need our vision. And doesn't that sound kind of familiar that you would need cranial nerves that are below in order to facilitate cranial nerves that are higher? But there's an element of balance where it's required that we are able to see. However, you can stimulate vestibulocochlear by isolating it and having them move and balance with eyes closed. I really love a great balance board. A great balance board is a wonderful way to facilitate that. Single-footed exercises by actually having them connect their body and doing a cross body exercises, isolating with one foot. Okay. Balance boards, I like to use in the same way that I would use a vibration plate. So if you have a vibration plate, the vibration plate I use always with them doing an active myofunctional therapy, isolated, static exercise like a cave or tongue to spot, and stimulating in that way. Okay. The balance board I would use in a very similar way where either you're on it and you get your balance on it and you figure it out, you cave, and then I want you to really feel your feet because now you're connecting your tongue to toes. Now really feel your feet while you're on this balance board, eyes closed. And you'd be surprised at how many people it takes a time or two, but they get it. They really get their balance, and the balance starts working in isolation from their ability to see. And so it's really fantastic. It's a great way to stimulate cranial nerve number 8. It's one of my favorites. Whenever I find dysfunction in this, I get a little excited because I know we're going to do things that are more fun because we're getting up, we're using the balance board, we're using the vibration plate, we're doing the single foot exercise, we're doing like more mobility. And so I get excited about it. It's not a great thing, I guess, for people, but I'm happy. So that's all that really matters, right? I'm just joking. Cranial nerve 9, glossopharyngeal. Glossopharyngeal, sensory and motor, okay? So this one is taste and swallowing. Now you can stimulate taste and really take that same lemon juice and see if they are able to sense and whatever. I don't like to do any of that, mostly because it takes a lot of time and who's got time for all of that? So I really look at it through the swallow and by asking them about different tastes, like what are their opinions on things that are too salty, like how much salt do they really have in their diet? Some people will tell you really quick, like, oh, I cannot have enough salt. Anything that is too salty, like I can't, like potato chips, I can't do that. Like that's great information. That gives you a sounding board to understand what's going on there. Anything that's too sweet, anything too salty, anything too acidic. Are they not a fan of citruses or are they whatever? Because you can really kind of gauge what's going on without actually implementing all those different tastes. The swallow, any sort of compensatory swallow or where there's recruitment of any musculature that shouldn't be involved, any sort of compensatory swallow, already you're getting a big red X on that glossopharyngeal. And that's something I know that we have to work on. Now, every single person in myofunctional therapy should have a dysfunction with cranial nerve 9. They should. I'm always working on it through what I would call a guided swallow. Now, what I would have is a tongue depressor, and I do the lowest breathing. Now, this one I don't have a problem with talking to you about because you can find it available on YouTube. But we do the lowest breathing exercise. So, lowest Laney's, quiet breathing, and I modify it a bit for me. What I want you to do is you could take a tongue depressor, okay? So you take your tongue depressor and I want you to put your tongue up to spot or your incisive papilla, tongue tip to incisive papilla. I was about to say tongue blade. I guess you could call it that too. The tongue depressor. You're going to place it. It's going to be horizontal. You're going to place it right in the area of the front teeth. Tongue falls down on it, but behind your teeth and your lips closed to hold. that tongue depressor. Okay. I want you to stay there. And I want you to stay in that same position for a minute to see how you feel. So I always do it one full session. We're going to sit for a minute. We're going to see how you feel with it. As you're sitting with it, are you struggling? If you struggle at any point in time, take it out. When you are with your tongue up on that popsicle stick or that tongue depressor or the tongue blade or whatever you're calling it, okay? When you have your tongue up on that, or hopefully you can see me. I'm like, I don't know what's going on with the sun. I am not in Florida right now. I am in New Jersey, and like New Jersey is a whole different beast from Florida. Like the sun never stops shining in Florida, even when it's raining. And here the sun certainly does like to hide behind clouds. So tongue, when it's up on the tongue depressor, it is going to be up against the palate. So you're kind of forcing it into proper oral resting posture, at least the first third. And you're kind of forcing in a very loose way. I don't want to use the word force like inappropriately, but you're kind of forcing a peristaltic swallow. So they have the tongue depressor here. The lips are closed. The lips have to stay closed. The tongue depressor has to stay here. And at some point during that minute, perhaps as time goes on, they're going to have to swallow. And it takes a second to really get used to it, especially if you have a really like incorrect swallowing pattern for your oral phase swallow. But you take that tongue depressor and you rely on it to hold that tongue up, and you just let go of the back and you'll get a swallow. And then there we're stimulating cranial nerve 9 just automatically by having a guided swallow. And so it's something that if we're starting on day 1 and they're doing their white flower, or what I'm going to put in the chat for the children, but if they're doing their white flower, they're doing their neti stick, they're getting the visual sensory stimulation, they're getting the facial stimulation through the motorboats, and we're doing all of the things to get that chewing and so forth. We're stimulating all of that. And then we get into a guided swallow. Like your first visit, you've now stimulated 9 cranial nerves. And then I keep stimulating them. Like they keep happening in these ways that are just really easy to repeat. So they go home and they're able to continue to stimulate them. So the lowest breathing, the quiet breathing, I start with 1 minute for everybody on my first visit, like the first, we're starting our program, this is what we're doing. So we start with that. And then they wind up keeping certain things. So you keep the white flower and the neti stick and so forth. You keep all that in your routine. You keep some form of stimulation, like we keep our motorboats, we keep that in there. We keep our quiet breathing, but we build on it. So we do our 1 minute at the very first day, and then I want them to build their way up to a goal of 3 or 4 minutes, depending how they did on that first minute. Then after that, I always ask, what do you think is a fair new goal? And we keep building that all the way up until they get to 30. 30 is a really great time. If you can sit with a stick in between your mouth, in between your lips, and it's got the perfect freeway space because that width is probably 2 to 3 millimeters between the stick, the width of the tongue depressor, and your lips are holding it in. So you're building up that lip strength and your tongue is resting. And as we work more on the posterior chain, you find that that moves up too. We're really building on all of these things that are stimulating the cranial nerves, but establishing a proper oral rest posture, which is the goal of myofunctional therapy, proper oral rest posture. Cranial nerve 10. This is the big guns. One of my favorites. I really love talking about the vagus nerve because there's nothing more interesting than the vagus nerve. While there are things that are more fun, cranial nerve 8 is a lot of fun. Cranial nerve 10 actually does really engage so many things that it makes it just such a wonderful thing to learn about. So this is sensory and motor too. This is going to be sensory perception for the palate, the throat, and the visceral muscles. And this is exactly what we need for myo. You got to stimulate the throat. You've got to stimulate the palate. And in stimulating the palate and the throat, you're going to be able to really get a lot of great changes there. Now, when there is a low or a floppy or a droopy, because all of these have been words I've seen on like ENT reports. But when there's the low droopy or low floppy soft palate, where you cannot see, they've got a high Mallampati score and you really can't see what's going on in the soft palate, or it raises asymmetrically, that's going to be something that's going to cue red flag vagus, red flag for our vagus, okay? This is motor for our vocal cords, soft palate, heart rate, dilation, constriction of blood vessels, and digestion. You're going to stimulate it through humming. As you're humming, really feel what's happening. You're engaging, and I've got a really great report on that too. Somebody also asked me for that in the chat. Okay, I will send you a really good research paper about that. That's also available on my website if anybody was interested. But humming, really, really good for those oropharyngeal and the corticomotor function of the oropharyngeal space. But humming, swallowing, soft palate engagement by having that lift and elevate, repeating ahs, repeating an nga, getting your uvula to jump with a sigh, like having that type of stimulation is really, really good. A vibration is really good too, but you have to engage while you're humming. So the vibration only works, I mean, you can vibrate, but I wouldn't vibrate like my hyoid and my larynx. That's just not my vibe. I don't like that. But you can stimulate by having the vibration plate and humming while on a vibration plate. Intraoral massage can be really good too if they can get in the back. I've got some really great exercises for how you can get in there and you can stimulate, and you can stimulate. They can stimulate for themselves, or you can stimulate for some of your clients by getting in and really stretching that palate and engaging and stimulating directly cranial nerve 10. I would also say that a lot of desensitization also is a great way to work on cranial nerve 10 too. So if you're working on any desensitization, like for hyperactive gag and so forth, or mismapped gag, absolutely something you want. Polyvagal theory. Polyvagal theory is fantastic if you want to dive deeper, okay? Stanley Rosenberg wrote Accessing the Healing Power of the Vagus Nerve. He breaks this down into a way that is just so beautiful to understand, because it's a really complicated thing that Stephen Porges had broke down into. So Stephen Porges is like, there's a sympathetic, but the parasympathetic actually has two main modes, and you could be down or up on the parasympathetic. But the sympathetic is going to always be your fight or flight. But then you have your ventral vagal, which is your high sympathetic, or dorsal vagal, low sympathetic. Low sympathetic is going to have you in that freeze. So it's fight, friend, freeze, right? So we are in that deer in headlights type of situation in the dorsal vagal. You can't really make a move. So when we say a deer in headlights, right? You imagine you're driving, there's a deer running across the road, they see headlights, they stop, body freezes. Now they can't move, they can't engage, even though what they really need to do is run, like flight. Flight needs to happen, but they're not engaging in that, right? So we've got ventral vagal, and the ventral vagal is our social engagement. It's about to get really, really loud. Social engagement for the ventral vagal. Our ventral vagal is going to be where we are going to be able to engage with others and have communication and so forth. So there's three different parts of the polyvagal theory, and you cannot really get progress with someone who is outside of ventral vagal. So if they're in that sympathetic mode, you have to upregulate them. If they're in that dorsal vagal mode, you have to upregulate them. Both ways, they really have to really get to a point of where they're feeling safe and where you can really get to a bit of calm. There's a lot to this, and I actually do 2 hours of lectures on cranial nerves in my what is its course called? Myomodalities. And so check that out on Myo Launch. That way you can really, really make the deep dive. Okay. I promise you, I could do much better than I'm doing right now. Okay, so our traditional autonomic nervous system, if you just believe in the two system instead of the three, the polyvagal theory, we're going to talk about our sympathetic and parasympathetic. So people talk about rest and digest and then fight or flight. And parasympathetic versus sympathetic is really going to be the difference between your body being able to optimally function and do things like digestion, which we know is so incredibly important for so many aspects of myofunctional therapy, or whether it's going to pause all of that because the body is just really feeling unsafe. So we get into certain methods of trauma, and you really have to understand trauma really well because we work in such a sensitive area, whether you're working as a dental professional or as a myofunctional therapist, you're working in a very sensitive area where people may have had trauma or abuse. And so all of these may trigger. There may be certain exercises that trigger them into sympathetic tone, and then you stop getting some of the benefits that you would have normally. Okay. Vagal tone is how you really know the difference between or shift between going from sympathetic tone into getting them into parasympathetic tone, or going from sympathetic or dorsal to ventral. All right. Decreased tone might happen during a difficult birth or a labor event. Birth, we know, is a traumatic experience just in and of itself. It might happen also because of additional stress. So there's so much talk on the internet right now about cortisol and having high cortisol levels. And just as a quick preview for all of you, next week, we're talking about myo and hormones. I have such great conversations with so many of you who actually schedule calls after speaking with me. It is something where we would hold on. I just see another comment. I just want to go look at the comments. Stanley who? Stanley Rosenberg. Hannah, you're very welcome. Okay. Where was I? Stress, cortisol. I have such great conversations with so many of you that do schedule calls with me. I am absolutely always down to do a call with anybody at any point in time. Now, everybody seems to think that like scheduling a call is a bad thing. You can schedule a call at any point in time with me. I'm happy to talk to anybody, and I really don't sell anything on most of these calls, but we have such engaging conversation that helps to push you forward, and in a way pushes me forward, because now I'm talking about hormones and whatever next week, to really talk about how you can make an impact through myofunctional therapy on hormonal health. Hello, I am like deep in the midst of perimenopause, and I am eager for other people to be aware of this madness that nobody's talking enough about. Perimenopause is a problem. But stress, big thing that can impact your vagal tone. Different holders for babies. A lot of people put their babies in these isolated things where they sit them down in like a thing called a bumbo, or they might leave them in their swing and they sit in the swing, and that's the only way baby will sleep. They shouldn't be sleeping like that. Diet, poor function, all of that can impact. And so how might that be reflective in hyperactive gag, digestive issues, poor tongue function, poor sleep, over retained reflexes, mouth breathing, excessive drooling? The list goes on. That is not even a comprehensive list. But you'll note that some of the things that you see there, you see all the time, whether it's in dentistry or in myo. You're seeing these things day in, day out. Poor vagal tone. How can we deal with that? Okay. We can deal with that through stimulating the cranial nerves. I've got one more slide in here about poor vagal tone, apparently. Uvula. The uvula, this is actually really important. The uvula, when you see it deviate, so it's more to one side than another. So if it lifts up and it lifts to the left, guess what that's a sign of? Poor vagal tone on the right. It's the opposite side, right? If it lifts up and it lifts to the right, poor vagal tone on the left. And so isolating the vagal stimulation to one side really does help to stimulate. High blood pressure and low ox. So if they have low oxygen, like 97, people will tell you 97 is totally helpful, totally healthy. You'll see a lot of people who are physicians or doctors like, oh, that's such nonsense. Like 97 is totally fine. 97 is a little bit, you're like teetering on hypooxygenation, hypoxia. You're teetering on that. Okay, we don't want that. Yes, you can go lower. Yes, a lot of people with obstructive sleep apnea go lower, and they're living, and so what's the big deal? But like, you should be in optimal function, and you can't get to ventral vagal if you are at 97 or below. So we want to be above. I always like 99 or 100. Those are my two goals. I'm always going for that. So how do you get to increase the vagal tone? Guess what's back? Uvula, stimulating that soft palate. Okay, so the soft palate, incredibly important. Engaging and humming, singing, gargling, upside down, reversing them as they're humming and singing. You're going to get double the stimulation. So getting them to be upside down while they're doing these tasks. Nasal breathing, proper oral rest posture for the tongue, desensitizing the gag, rhythmic movement. It's a lot of great ways that you can do that. Rhythmic movement during a wonderful functional activity is movement during songs that are in the 60 to 80 beats per minute range. You could also do rhythmic breathing, which I've talked about in a previous lecture before. And bonus points if you've already watched that lecture and you know how to do this. But 60 to 80 beats per minute, and just regulating the body and moving in symmetric patterns that are repeatable in the 60 to 80 beats per minute range. I've got two examples of songs. I wonder if these are going to play, that are in that 60 to 80 beats per minute. I'm not going to play the whole song. If you ever leave me, baby. So very rhythmic. Leave some morphine at my door. Help you regulate your body with your heart rate. Come on, Maxwell. I love this song. This song is, I love it. If you go on YouTube and you literally type in playlist song 60 to 80 beats per minute, they have entire playlists with like hundreds of songs across various genres. But it is a fantastic way to engage in rhythmic movement and really stimulate that vagus nerve. There we go. That way you can increase your vagal tone. Also, diaphragmatic breathing, just learning how to breathe with your diaphragm being the support instead of the chest muscles and the upper rib. Body to body connection. So that's BB wearing. So all of those skin to skin connections. You can do other skin to skin, you can just do hugging. There are some people who have very stimulating somatic exercises where you are hugging another person and you get that skin to skin. However, you get body to body connection, it's going to help you upregulate that vagal tone. Laughing. The laughter fairy, Laura Kalatz, Dr. Laura Kalatz. It's absolutely fabulous. She is an airway provider. I think she does Dr. Felix Liao's stuff. Absolutely fabulous. Laughing. She teaches whole things on laughing. So look her up. Dr. Laura Kalatz, the laughter fairy. Chewing, which clearly you're doing already in myo. Cold water immersion. So like a cold plunge, but you're not going to do that in myo. That just might be a recommendation that you make. Or the vibration plate, like yay! There's no shortage of uses for that vibration plate, and so I use it all the time. Everybody who comes in my office is getting on the vibration plate. Cranial nerve 11. So 11's accessory, your sternocleidomastoid, a little bit of your platysma, definitely your ability to shrug your shoulders. Like that's what we're looking for. If we have asymmetric shrugging, it's really hard for me to mimic some of these things. But if we have asymmetric shrugging, that's always a thing we want to work on. And we can stimulate that through vestibular exercises or through manual therapy. I'm kind of rushing through now because I'm like, oh my gosh, we're so close. And I know it's a weekend, so I'm going to let you guys go soon. Cranial nerve 12, motor, tongue movement. This is all our being able to manipulate the tongue into its various ranges of motion and the various abilities and tasks that it has, like cupping, lateralization, retraction, suction, elevation, those types of things. So you stimulate that through myofunctional therapy. And so with that, I will leave room for some questions and I'll check the chat in just a second. I think it's incredibly important to be like engaged and interested in learning these things and to take whatever you can from this little lecture that I was able to do for you today and to use as much of it as you can, even if you just had one little takeaway. But it's so important that if you are sparked by this, that you do something about it. So like implement, make the next step, take an action step to make sure that you are leveraging the information and creating a win for yourself and the people that you work with. Okay. I am open to calls at any point in time. And so people, humming report, Amanda, oh, you were on me. I'm going straight to YouTube after this and I'm putting everything in the comments. Okay. The next lecture is going to be hormones and myo. And I look forward to seeing you next time. I hope everybody had a really great lecture. Thank you all for being here. You have no idea how appreciated you are. Much love, and I'll see you next week. Happy weekend.